State Police, demanding Liam and his father and other families be released immediately. While federal officials claim the family inside are cared for, an attorney who says he represents a family there says the conditions are, quote, worse than people think.
The water is putrid. They have to mix baby formula with water that nobody wants to even smell. The food has bugs in it. The food has dirt in it.
All right. Well, Ed, obviously just stuff that we all need to know, we need to hear. Congressman Castro, I know, met with others, including Liam and his father. Who else did he speak to inside the facility?
Speaking with staffers of the congressman, that they were told that they had set up a sign-up sheet inside the facility so that people could sign up and speak with the congressman, as well as Congressman Jasmine Crockett, who was with Joaquin Castro as well today. The staffers told me that there were hundreds of people who signed up on that list to speak with them. Joaquin Castro told me that he had been inside the facility more than 3 hours. They got there at 11 o'clock in the morning, didn't leave until almost 2:30 Central Time. They spent about 30 minutes or so meeting with Liam and his father, but there were hundreds of others, and they kind of documented what they thought were abuses and the conditions that they were enduring inside that facility, which is one of the reason why after the event you heard the two congressmen and women coming out saying that they feel that not only should ICE be disbanded, but that these families should be released, and that they also were calling for the impeachment of Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem as well.
All right. Ed Lavandera, thank you very much, on the ground in Texas. And also tonight, the Minneapolis police chief is speaking out now against ICE's deadly tactics, calling them alarming. The chief warning federal immigration officials are fueling fear and torching progress. Shimon Prokupez is out front with this special report on Chief Brian O'Hara, who is now suddenly in the spotlight.
It's been alarming to me that we've had shooting, and then another shooting, and then another shooting, and nothing's changed.
Chief Brian O'Hara has been working to rebuild the Minneapolis Police Department in the wake of the murder of George Floyd in 2020.
I was afraid that was it, it's over. Like, we were gonna wind up having looting and destruction again, just like in 2020. And we might just slide into that cycle again, that cops are burned out, they want to leave, crime increases at the same time, and people completely lose faith in law enforcement.
Now, he says, the surge of federal immigration operations in his city threatens to undo the progress that's been made.
It's got to be hard to see, especially as a longtime law enforcement leader.
Working the other night with an officer around midnight, we saw a car take a red light, so we pulled them over, and it was a young family with a child in the back seat, and they had come out late at night to pick up food because they were afraid they were going to get stopped. I mean, the woman looked like she hadn't eaten in days, the mother. I mean, I don't know how you can't be impacted on a human level by some of the things that are happening.
The escalation of ICE tactics against the public here, culminating with the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretti, have been widely criticized. It's the kind of policing Chief O'Hara was brought into Minneapolis to stamp out.
I don't think it's too much to ask the federal government to conduct law enforcement in a way that respects the Constitution, in a way that, lives up to the standards that people expect law enforcement in this country to have today, to be professional, to use tactically sound methods. I think a lot of the videos you see, it looks like policing from 30 years ago, at best.
Chief O'Hara brought us to Colonial Market, the epicenter of some of the most violent protests back in 2020. We met the owner, Danny Hernandez.
So this whole strip here burned in 2020.
So this is all new, like in the last couple of
years.
years. And now it's all empty.
No, it's all empty. We have 12 small businesses. As you can see, all of them are closed. There's only one standing besides the grocery store. Everybody else told me that they're no longer gonna be able to keep going. To get back to our feet, that's gonna be a challenge. So the impact, that it has, the scars are gonna be there.
There's still ongoing public safety issues in these communities that we have to try and deal with. And if everybody's just scared and nobody tells us anything, you're going to create a situation where there's entire groups of people that are going to be the perfect victims because they can easily be targeted for crime, and they're not going to report things because they're scared.
MPD really worked hard to gain the trust. Now we're not trusting federal government. Now I don't know, like anytime people hear feds, they're gonna just clinch,
What happens now? Like, what do you think? Yeah, well,
I don't know.
like, what is, like, hopefully things de-escalate.
De-escalate, that's what we need. We need peace.
Shimon Prokopez, CNN, Minneapolis.
Lead President Trump now warning Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey that he is, quote, playing with fire, unquote, if the city does not enforce federal immigration laws. The Democratic mayor responded on X or Twitter, posting, quote, the job of our police is to keep people safe, not enforce federal immigration laws. I want our police preventing homicides, not hunting down a working dad. Everyone should feel safe calling 911. Mayor Frey also pointed out that his immigration policies for Minneapolis are similar to the ones that Rudy Giuliani had when he was mayor of New York City. Now, Trump's threat comes just one day after his tone slightly softened momentarily, saying he planned to de-escalate the high-octane situation in Minneapolis. But then Trump remarked on last night's physical attack on Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, saying, quote, I think she's a fraud. She probably had herself sprayed. Knowing her, there is no possible evidence of that, and that is not a particularly compassionate response to a member of Congress getting attacked. So I think we can call this one of the shortest-lived Trump changes in tone in Trump history. The backlash against the Trump administration has continued since federal officers shot and killed protester Alex Pretti on Saturday. Today, a Homeland Security official said that the officers involved in that shooting are now on administrative leave, which is standard protocol when there's an internal investigation. And as for the immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis, a changing of the guard, so to speak, Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino has been removed from Minneapolis. President Trump put his border czar, Tom Homan, in charge there. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democrat, spoke about his meeting with Homan.
Tom Homan's a professional, which is a lot more than Bovino and Christie know. But look, I think the thing we said is we're very clear about this, that we need these folks out of Minnesota.
Governor Walz is far from the only official singing the criticisms of DHS Secretary Kristi Noem after she rushed out and basically accused Alex Pretti of brandishing a gun, being a domestic terrorist, intending to kill as many law enforcement officers as possible. Of course, we all have seen the videos. There's no evidence suggests that that is true. Top House Democrats have announced they will soon support a vote to impeach Noem unless Trump immediately moves to fire her. So far, Trump is standing by her. But now some Republicans are saying they want Noem gone. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and a senator who will join us in just a second, retiring Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina.
Discrediting what I consider to be a very well-organized operation in ICE, but they're discrediting even these officers. They're going to make their job more difficult and more dangerous with this incompetence that I'm seeing out of Noem and out of Stephen Miller.
The president called you a loser, I believe.
I am thrilled about that. That makes me qualified to be Homeland Security Secretary and Senior Advisor to the President.
Within the Trump administration, we are now seeing some finger-pointing. Axios reporting that Secretary Noem says that her initial statements on the shooting were directly from Trump aide Stephen Miller. Miller, of course, on Saturday posted on X, he falsely called Pretti an assassin. But Miller told CNN that, quote, the initial statement from DHS was based on reports from the Customs and Border Patrol officers on the ground. Miller also claimed that officials were evaluating why CBP agents in Minneapolis, quote, may not have been following, unquote, proper protocol before the Pretti shooting. An acknowledgement a bit there of possible wrongdoing. But while we are hearing a lot of Trump administration officials playing the blame game, we're not hearing any of them apologize for smearing a man that federal agents killed, not to mention killing him to begin with. Let's go to Shimon Prokopez on the ground in Minneapolis. And Shimon, what are you seeing there today? And now that Tom Homan's in charge of the immigration operation there, is anything going to change in terms of tactics or approach?
I mean, certainly people here hope so, right? The city officials, the police department, the people who have been on these streets living in fear, they're not that optimistic, right? I mean, things here are so fragile. At any point, people feel that things can really escalate here. It's been a couple of days of calm. You know, one of the people who is certainly very concerned about what's happening here is the police chief of the Minneapolis Police Department. And I spent some time talking to him, and he is so concerned over the tactics that some of the federal officers were using here, and other things that he's concerned about is just his relationship with the community. Take a listen.
I'm hopeful that, you know, some people in charge on both sides will say, let's just get together and figure this thing out, because this isn't good for anybody. Nobody wins when people get killed. Who wins? Nobody. Let's acknowledge that, on one hand, federal law enforcement has a role to do. They have lawful authority. There is something for them to do. But let's also acknowledge that what's different today is how they are enforcing things. It's the methods that they're using. Let's look at, you know, the tactics and things, like the reality that this is causing not just all this fear, which is very real, it's causing practices that are just, they're not constitutional. It's not okay.
And that's the thing, Jake, there. Like, he is so candid about how he feels about what has been happening here. And certainly this police department, this community in Minneapolis has been working so hard to maintain peace and to get past so many years of trauma since the George Floyd killing. The other thing, Jake, that's important to note, and this sort of struck me when I was talking to him, is that he's actually concerned that everything that's been happening here could actually cause crime to go up, because he's worried that all of the partnerships that the local police has built with federal law enforcement can now be gone, with prosecutors being fired and federal officials creating all of this chaos, that some of these agencies are not going to want to work together. And his concern is that crime will go up because the gang activity could go up, and that the work that federal law enforcement has been doing up with the locals, that all now could end.
All right, Shimon Prokopez in Minneapolis, thanks so much. Joining us now, Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina. Senator, good to have you on. So we've heard a number of accusations from Kristi Noem, from Stephen Miller, about what happened Saturday to Alex Pretti and about him. At best, these folks were ill-informed. At worst, they were lying. We all have seen the video. What's been your reaction to what they've said about Alex Pretti and what they claimed happened that day?
Well, I think they're doing the American people and the president a great disservice by not realizing how much attention is focused on these operations and how details and discipline matter. They spoke before they knew anything about what occurred on the ground. They didn't even implement the typical protocol that you would in an officer-involved shooting, as much to protect those officers as the scene of the incident, everything that goes into an investigation after a casualty, after a death. They talked too soon. It looked like they wanted to get ahead of a news cycle, and it really discredits it. It brings their credibility into question. And Jake, it's very important for people in North Carolina to know, I've held every sheriff in North Carolina that was a sanctuary city jurisdiction accountable. We went after them. Our office filed a bill for justice for victims of sanctuary cities, to make sure that if somebody was harmed by someone who was detained and not transferred to ICE, that they could sue that local government and get restitution. So I've made it very clear that I want law enforcement to work with each other, but you can't be situational. You can't expect that out of a Biden administration and Democrat mayors and then not expect us to lead by example by coordinating with state and local law enforcement. I believe that Noem is out of her depth. I think she's reached the Peter principle. She is not competent to run this organization, and I haven't even begun to talk about the failure on FEMA and disaster response in North Carolina, but I will be tomorrow on the floor.
Yeah, so you have called Noem a complete failure on that issue of disaster response, saying she doesn't know how to manage, the people who badly need resources are not getting them. As you know, North Carolina this weekend is facing the possibility of the heaviest snow in decades. We all saw what happened to the poor citizens of western North Carolina during that natural disaster. If DHS fails to provide adequate support this weekend, what would that mean for Tar Heels?
Well, I think it could be a tragedy. Keep in mind, I've done a comparison, I'll be sharing this tomorrow, between President Trump's first administration, which did an extraordinarily good job on disaster response, and the abysmal performance over the last 13 months in this Homeland Security or this FEMA administration under Noam's leadership. It's not even close. And that's what the American people and people in North Carolina need to know. We had an ice storm go through the mountains on top of the damage that Helene has caused. We still don't have I-40 open as it was before. It may not be till 2027. Now we may have enormous snowfall and flooding that comes after that, and they've got to be ready to respond. I'm glad that they released some $200 million today. I'm sure it's just coincidental that I'm starting to cast light on it, but that's a drop in the bucket to what they already should have had out to the local and state entities trying to recover from Helene.
So Senate Democrats are now talking about withholding their votes on the government funding bill that's coming up soon, unless there are serious changes made to ICE and these immigration enforcement operations. They're not saying defund ICE, they're not canceling ICE, but they're talking about canceling ICE or getting rid of ICE, but they are talking about, for instance, a measure to saying ICE officers have to take down their masks. And there's a number of things that I'm sure you've heard from Senator Schumer. Body cameras, that sort of thing. Would you be willing to negotiate with Democrats on those changes?
Well, I think some of the reforms make sense. I think body cameras make sense. I think de-escalation training makes sense. I am concerned about the mask because I've seen people dox me. I've seen people take pictures that identify law enforcement officers and then put their families at risk. So I think that that's a step too far. They need to think it through. Look, again, the ICE officers on the ground, I thank them for their service and the work that they've done in the past. My problem is with when you have a Homeland Security administrator that thinks it's cute to name a camp Alligator Alcatraz and to name an operation in Maine Catch of the Day. In some respects, I think she's probably speaking the truth there. It's not a focused, data-driven apprehension strategy. It's Catch of the Day, and at least she's named it that way. But I'm tired of the too cute sophomore high school kid sort of humor on a very serious subject. And we are absolutely tearing away at the fabric of the incredible work that Joint Task Force law enforcement agencies do every day. The FBI, the DEA, ICE, local sheriffs, police chiefs, state law enforcement. She is at the top. She is responsible for what I think is the single biggest step back in local law enforcement coordination and the effectiveness of Joint Task Force operations than anybody in an administration for the length of time I've been in public service.
Ahead this hour, 2 officers involved in the shooting death of Alex Pretti have been put on administrative leave. Donald Trump warns Iran that time is running out to make a nuclear deal as the U.S. builds up military strength in the region and 18 Champions League games take place at the same time. Let's find out who's going through the next round. We will have those results. But we do begin with the latest developments in Minnesota. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security says officers involved in the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti have been placed on administrative leave. Meantime, the Trump administration is again ramping up the rhetoric. Vice President J.D. Vance is accusing Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey of instructing local police not to help federal agents. And President Trump says Frey is playing with fire if Minneapolis doesn't enforce federal immigration law. Kevin Liptak is with me. Kevin, as this rhetoric has heated up throughout the day, I am wondering, is there any indication that this will lead to any real change on the ground? Now, we know the Trump administration is taking some flack for all of this, even from Republicans. And yet, as you know, the people from Minnesota just want to know if the tactics on the ground are going to change.
That seems to be, I think, the desire, and it's included inside the White House. You know, the president wouldn't have sent Tom Homan, who is his border czar, who he said this week would sort of supplant the leadership that had been on the ground in Minneapolis, if he didn't want to see some sort of alteration in how things were going on the ground there. And it is true, Tom Homan had taken a different view of how these immigration enforcement operations should be carried out. He had advocated much much more targeted operations, going specifically after criminals, people with criminal records, people who had a history of violence, as opposed to what we had been seeing, which is these wide sweeps of entire neighborhoods essentially looking for any undocumented migrant to round up and deport. And so that, I think, had been the desire. I think right now it might be too early to tell whether those changes are being put into effect. We have not, for example, seen waves of officers leaving Minneapolis. And we have seen already scenes that seem somewhat similar to what we've seen previously. For example, yesterday we saw ICE agents show up at the Ecuadorian consulate there in Minneapolis, which drew outrage from the Ecuadorian government. So I think right now it might be too early to say whether this change in tactic is coming. What we can say is that there have been attempts, at least on the part of Tom Homan, to try and turn down some of the temperature when it comes to leaders in that city. So he had meetings with the governor, Tim Walz, with the mayor, Jacob Frey. All sides of it came out of those meetings, at least saying that they were productive. Tom Homan saying that, yes, they will always have disagreements with those elected officials about how some of this is carried out, but that they were at least talking and at least heading in the direction that they wanted to be heading. Now, we should say that was before President Trump came out today and warned Jacob Frey that he was playing with fire. J.D. Vance, as you mentioned, also coming out against that mayor. So it seems like it was a pivot from the pivot in a lot of ways in terms of taking down the temperature, but at least for now, it does seem as if the will, at least on the part of the White House, is to turn to the tactics that would dictate a much more narrow operation on the ground there.
Yeah, which is certainly what people, not just in Minnesota, but across the United States, many have been looking for. Kevin Liptak for us. Appreciate it. Now, do you believe this is real de-escalation, and are you seeing any of that in your community?
So on Monday, when Bovino was out and we heard that some of the ICE agents were going to be leaving, the temperament did feel like we were moving in a place of having some relief and things were going to get better. And I haven't had a chance, because this incident happened last night, to speak with the mayor to talk about his conversation with Homan and the border czar. And so I need to check back in to see how the mayor is feeling. I know today I was getting some calls of ICE being in the area that I represent. It did, though. I felt hopeful on Monday. It felt like it was getting better. Because of this incident, I really haven't had a chance to check in and know what the temperature is right now in Minneapolis out on the streets with folks.
Some Republicans on Capitol Hill have spoken out about this. Do you believe that they can affect change, really warning the president that this is not a good look and that the tactics have to change?
Absolutely. We need bipartisan support. This is not about what party you belong to. There's fear in all of our communities. One of the things I've been saying to people is we talk about it being in Minneapolis, but it's throughout our state. And people in this state voted for the president. And so, I think it's going to take Republican lawmakers and Democrats. It's going to take all of us to end this.
When we talk about ending it, though, many people, have said, look, in other jurisdictions across the United States, local authorities do cooperate much more. Can you see that give and take coming together with local officials and federal officials as they try to do what they say will be more targeted apprehensions by ICE?
I think that looks different for every community. For us, we know that we're outnumbered with our law enforcement in the Twin Cities metro area to the number of agents that are here. So we don't have the resources in Minneapolis for our police to be out with ICE. But I think what we want to know in Minneapolis is who are the bad people you're looking for. We've been told over and over again that there's some terrible criminals in our communities, and we want them out as well. So I think for us, we're really focused on who are you looking for, where are they at, and how are you going to get them out and make sure that everyone is still safe in this community.
Do you want the attention from Minnesota to just dissipate, or do you think the attention right now is a good thing for the community? I will add that Democrats are planning to withhold votes now, perhaps suspending this new spending bill, leading to a government shutdown. Do you believe it should come, that what's going on in Minnesota should come to that kind of showdown in D.C.?
I think like what's happening in Minnesota can happen anywhere. And so because we've somehow been made the state, and in Minneapolis, the city, the kind of the poster children of everything that goes wrong with this, it's going to take Minneapolis to figure out outcomes along with lawmakers all over the country to figure this out, so it doesn't happen to other people in the same way it has in Minnesota.
Ms. Vita, we will leave it there as we continue to watch what happens in your community. And as I said, I know it was an innocuous substance, but glad everyone in that room is safe.
Breaking news, ICE violating judge's orders. The chief federal judge in Minnesota slamming the agency, claiming it violated nearly 100 orders in 74 immigration cases in Minnesota this year. Wow. I mean, there's only been 28 days in this year, and a lot of them have been weekends. George W. Bush appointed judge writes, this list should give pause to anyone, no matter his or her political beliefs, who cares about the rule of law. ICE has likely violated more court orders in January 2026 than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. Judge Patrick Schultz adding, quote, ICE is not a law unto itself. It's a scathing reprimand, and it comes as Pam Bondi landed in Minneapolis, firing off a whole series of social media posts in which she claimed agents had arrested 16 people for assaulting law enforcement officers. Now, that's what she says, but she didn't just name them. She actually posted their pictures as well, their mugshots. A move slammed by another judge. This was the judge overseeing the first court appearances for those 16 people. According to the New York Times, that judge says she was, quote, deeply disturbed that Bondi posted the names and mugshots on social media. And our Ryan Goodman says tonight the Attorney General's action flouts another long-settled Justice Department norm. It's even more egregious when this department often fails to successfully prosecute people it arrests, including in protest cases. It treads on the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Bondi, though, no surprise, defiant in her post, making it clear that this is just the beginning. She writes, we expect more arrests to come. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Nothing will stop President Trump and the Department of Justice from enforcing the law. So the talk of Trump de-escalating the situation, as he said, seems to be in question at this moment, especially after he told Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey that he's, quote, playing with fire. Just about 2 days after Trump said he had a great conversation with Frey. The president also going after Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who was targeted during a speech last night. He claimed without evidence that she staged the incident. He told ABC News, I don't think about her. I think she's a fraud. She probably had herself sprayed, knowing her. And Trump then raged at Republicans who have turned against his Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, including Republicans like retiring Senator Thom Tillis.
She's a complete failure on a disaster response. She clearly doesn't know how to manage. She's never managed a large organization, and she's failing at every possible measure of the job.
All right, so he's calling it like he sees it. Trump, meanwhile, responding to him and to Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, who also slammed Noem by calling them losers, adding they're terrible senators. One is gone and the other should be gone. And then there's this bizarre fundraising email from Trump's Never Surrender PAC, which threatens to unleash ICE agents on his own donors. It reads, are you a proud American citizen, or does ICE need to come track you down? Tonight, we're learning that the federal agents who fatally shot Alex Pretti have now been placed on administrative leave. That is important. A shooting that prompted outspoken Trump critic and singer Bruce Springsteen to release a new song tonight. It's a new song. A lot of people are talking about this. It's called The Streets of Minneapolis.
Through the winter's ice and cold, down Nicollet Avenue, a city of flame fought fire and ice neath an occupier's boots. King Trump's private army from the DHS, guns belted to their coats, came to Minneapolis to enforce the law, or so their story goes.
Shimon Prokupez is out front live in Minneapolis. And Shimon, what more are you learning there on the ground, you know, in light of Bondi coming and posting all of those images and what these judges are saying tonight?
Well, Erin, there's a lot of concern because
because for the past few days we've been talking about de-escalation, and there's a lot of concern that Pam Bondi being here, putting out these photos, all of these federal agents who are still in the streets here making these arrests, that this could escalate the situation. And, you know, most find it interesting that while many are calling for the Department of Justice to investigate what happened here behind me on this street where many people have been coming to pay their respects to Alex Pretti, there's no focus from the Department of Justice on the investigation of what happened here. And many people are asking why that is. And certainly people are worried about the next steps here. And for the first time, we will hear from tomorrow from the border czar, who is expected to have his first press conference. So we'll see what the next steps here are tomorrow when he speaks, but certainly that's going to be a good indication for us on the next steps here in the federal process here and the federal presence here in Minneapolis.
Breaking news, this new video, and this is very new video. It is of another incident with Alex Pretti. It has just emerged. It shows a physical clash between Alex Pretti and federal agents over a week before he was fatally shot by Customs and Border Protection officers. Now, a representative from the family is confirming to CNN that the man seen in the footage is Pretti. Without further ado, let me just let you see it for yourself in full. I should have said that. Okay, so there was no audio on that. As you know, obviously, you might have thought maybe that your volume was not working, but there was no volume on it. But I think you saw it very clearly. So let's go to Priscilla Alvarez to tell us what we know about what we just saw there. So Priscilla, tell us exactly what we see there. I think everybody watching this now can recognize Alex Pretti there, kicking that tail light. But tell us exactly what we know happened and any context that you've learned.
Yeah, Aaron, and as a reminder, this is a physical clash that happened between Alex Pretti and federal agents over a week before he was fatally shot in Minneapolis this past weekend. So let's walk through that video. You see him there shouting and also kicking a tailgate on that vehicle as it drives away. There you're seeing the tackling of the federal agents. This whole interaction only lasts a few seconds. Now, you'll also notice here in a bit that there does appear to be a gun that is tucked in his waistband. It's unclear, however, if the agents notice it. There you see the gun tucked into his waistband. Now, they do not disarm him, and as we see later in that video, the agents walk away. It is unclear, Aaron, however, what happened before this video and what happens afterwards. I am told, however, that the Department of Homeland Security is reviewing this video. Recall that they are part of this investigation into the fatal shooting last weekend. A few other notes of context, Aaron. This was filmed less than 2 miles from the scene of the deadly encounter this past weekend. And as you can see from his attire, he is wearing similar clothing as he was, again, this past Saturday. Now, Aaron, your viewers may remember, CNN previously reported just yesterday that Pretti did have an encounter with federal agents a week prior to Saturday where he suffered a broken rib. It is unclear, however, if the video we're seeing here is of that incident. And Aaron, we are continuing to review additional footage of what unfolded here. But again, this is a physical clash between Alex Pretti and federal agents over a week before he was shot by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents on Saturday in Minneapolis.
All right, Priscilla, thank you very much with that very important new reporting. And John Miller is here. So, John, as Priscilla is saying, it is we cannot definitively say that it was at this incident when he got the rib broken. But we do know that they've only said there was one other known incident. So I'm going to say it appears likely that it is that incident, but we cannot definitively say that. But this is very significant that we're actually looking at this.
It is, and it raises a whole raft of different questions. But one question is, and it goes back to the tactics, behavior, and procedures of these officers. So here you have an individual who is kicking their car, breaks a taillight. The officers immediately get out of the car, grab him, wrestle him to the ground, or attempt to. For 25 seconds, they're struggling with him. It does not appear that during that time, even though he wriggles out of his coat and escapes their grasp, that they detect or know that he has a loaded firearm in the small of his back in a holster.
Right.
So they miss that. But
Which in the case where he died, of course, they saw it, removed it,
and then
subsequently he was shot.
Exactly. So that's a kind of a pattern of poor tactics that we're seeing here, because if someone destroys government property, breaks a taillight on a vehicle, and you get out and you wrestle with that person, the normal thing to do is to arrest that person. If
you don't beat them up and leave them there, right? That's just not. That's
exactly.
not. Okay. Just to be clear.
And in fact, the unwritten rule is, if you end up in a physical confrontation where you end up rolling around on the ground with somebody enough to maybe even create an injury, that usually follows with an arrest. Otherwise, you're just committing an assault under the color of law and leaving. So the fact that they didn't take police action is another deficit in kind of, what are the rules of engagement and what does law have to do with it?
Right. So operating outside the law, outside of precedent, outside of norm, outside of training, sloppy, all of that true. When it comes to the next incident, I was saying to you, as you and I were getting ready to come to air, I was saying, well, in a sense, the two may be completely unrelated, right? If he comes upon a group of, he's protecting the woman that he was trying to do, and there's a group of Customs and Border Patrol officers, and that one ends so tragically. But you raised a very interesting point, which...
So the question is, are any of the agents involved in the confrontation we just looked at 11 days before, any of the same agents who encountered him on Saturday that ultimately led to him being shot to death? In other words, one of the questions we've been asking as we look at that video is, the government narrative, the first version was, he approached agents with a gun. In fact, when you look at the videos, they approached him rather aggressively, and we don't know the answer to this, but if they were the same agents from the earlier encounter, were they still upset? Were they angry at him over what he did to their car? The fact that they tried to arrest him and he got away, was that a factor? And until we figure out which agents were at both encounters, we won't know that.
No, and obviously they have, none of that information has been released. Although, of course, as we point out, Attorney General Bondi is very quick to release mugshots of people that they arrested today. And the breaking news, this new video that has just come into CNN, I want to share it with you again. It does not include audio, but it is very clear what you see here. A physical clash between Alex Pretti and federal agents. This happened over a week before he was killed. Now, this video was posted today by the digital outlet, The News Movement. In it, you see Pretti shouting at agents. He kicks their vehicle's taillight and breaks it as they're driving away. So then they stop. You see an agent get out of the back seat. They get out and they tackle him to the ground. This interaction lasts a few seconds before Pretti gets up. Now, a few things here. We don't know for sure if this was the incident in which he broke a rib prior to, of course, when he was killed. We don't know for sure if this is the same incident. But we do know that he's got a gun in his waistband, which it's not clear if agents noticed it. If they did, they didn't do anything about it. They don't disarm him. They walk away. It is unclear, obviously, what took place immediately before or after the footage. But the fact that he had the weapon on him is obviously crucial. We know that he had a permit to conceal carry, and we know he had that weapon on him, although not out and not being held in his hands when he was killed. Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin joins me now. She sits on the Homeland Security Committee. And Senator, I appreciate your time, obviously, as we're all trying to get the facts of what happened here. And, at the beginning, it was very unclear there'd be any sort of an investigation at all. So just by asking you about this new video that we have, does it change anything for you, Senator?
Well, look, I just saw it, a couple minutes ago on your show. Look, you can't destroy federal property. You can't just bash in a light like that. But it doesn't, to me, what I've seen in a couple of minutes online is just that people are making this equivalency, like, look, he bashed in a light. and so it was justified for him to be killed. And I think that that's completely false. So this is why we need an independent investigation. This is why we need to have someone besides DHS, besides ICE, do an investigation of what actually happened. But no matter what, I mean, even if he knocked in a light, which is not legal, you don't deserve to be shot 10 times in the street. So I think this is why we need some independent voices here.
Yeah, and very, very well and fairly said there. You were one, Senator, of 7 Senate Democrats who voted to confirm Kristi Noem as Secretary of DHS. Obviously, here we are now. You've seen what she said, how she's conducted herself in these past days. Do you regret your vote?
Well, I was just talking about this on the Senate floor. And look, a year ago, as a Michigander that has a bunch of border crossings, some of the busiest border crossings, I need to work with Department of Homeland Security every day, with Customs and Border, with Border Patrol every day. We have a new bridge that's coming in 2026. So I had Kristi Noem in my office, and I talked to her about those things, and I needed a productive relationship. And I don't regret as a Michigander that I was trying to have some sort of relationship with someone I need. But over the past year, I mean, it's just, she's beyond the pale of fundamentally not understanding who we are as Americans. Just this past weekend, she called Alex Pretti a domestic terrorist. She just doesn't understand in her cabinet secretary role, her responsibilities. And so she should resign. If not, the president should fire her. And if not, then we should impeach her. And by the way, it's not just her. We know Stephen Miller is the through line on so many just dark policies related to immigration, from caging kids in the first term of Trump to what's going on in Minneapolis. He is the through line. He should resign as well or be fired. But, you know, she has the big job, the Senate confirmed job. And so that's the one I've been, you know, her resignation or firing is where I've been focusing.
I just want to play part of an exchange you had with her during her confirmation hearing that really stands out to me now, Senator. Here it is.
I want to hear from you as an intelligence officer that you're going to speak about real threats and not blow something up, politicize something, make something more exciting because that's maybe what the president wants to hear.
I will be as transparent and factual every day with you and the American people as possible based on the information that I have.
Obviously, Alex Pretti, she came out and said he was brandishing a weapon, which video showed to be false. Do you believe she lied to you, or do you believe that it's, as she's saying it now, that, you know, and Stephen Miller is saying that she got the wrong talking points on the video, didn't look for herself, and so it was that, not a lie?
No, that I think, I'm sorry, that is, she lied. Because on so many issues, both in the headlines and out, so many requests, so many asks that the committee has had of her. You know, she's appeared once in front of our committee in a year, and we've had federal troops deployed to just countless cities. She just fundamentally said what she needed to say to get through that hearing, and then did none of that transparency. And you know, part of it may be that she's just doing the bidding of the White House, who is really in charge of immigration policy, but it doesn't matter. Right? You have the big job, you wanted the big office, you wanted the big security detail, and to look cool as a cabinet secretary, you own the accountability. And I think that's, whether it's Alex Pretti or many times before then, she just does not understand her role as a cabinet secretary or as it was designed.
Senator Slotkin, I appreciate your time and thank you tonight.
Thank you.
Also tonight, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, breaking with President Trump, saying that the organization, quote, unequivocally believes that all law-abiding citizens have a right to keep and bear arms anywhere they have a legal right to be. This after Trump said Alex Pretti shouldn't have been carrying a gun after he was killed by federal immigration officials. Of course, Alex Pretti had a legal right to conceal carry. What Trump is saying is a stark departure from what he has said before, what other top administration officials have said about Americans' right to bring guns to protests. Our K-File has discovered stunningly contradictory statements from Trump, from the FBI Director Kash Patel, and from Secretary Kristi Noem of the DHS, who just this week blamed Pretti for being armed at a protest.
I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign. This is a violent riot when you have someone showing up with weapons and are using them to assault law enforcement officers.
Well, Kyle Rittenhouse had a lot to say about that. KFIL's Andrew Kaczynski is with me now. And Andrew,